bringing facts back into fashion, and we are making simple sanity sexy again. And remember, as always, we're not crazy.
You are.
So welcome to the second podcast of Radically Rational. I am the relentlessly optimistic Paul Alexander. My partner is the incredibly talented Lori Pearson. And for everybody who bet that we wouldn't make it to the second episode, you just crapped out.
How much were the bets?
I don't know. The smart money was not on us, though. I do know that.
Right.
That we were getting points on that one. No question about it.
We did it.
How you been? What's on your mind?
Oh, golly. So much. So much. Got the debates happening, got the baseball thing happening, which I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about.
Yeah, because I think maybe there's an angle here that maybe people have not considered.
Right? And you're
bit.
here to help.
So just to let you know, we'll reset just briefly. Lori and I both have media backgrounds. We have not to date actually done time in prison. And Lori, this is what I'm thinking. If we ever have to, we'll just immediately seek a presidential pardon, commutation, and then we will apply for the Medal of Freedom.
Okay. We should get it, too.
So that would be the
Lickety-split.
classic win-win. Our job here is marginalizing crazies of all stripes. We want to bring logic and truth and fairness back into conversations. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this fake news thing, how you can avoid it, and how, just as importantly, you can avoid disseminating fake news. I'm going to maintain, at least, that the problem isn't necessarily that we're not listening to everybody or not listening to enough people. In some cases, Lori, I'm going to maintain that we're listening to way too many people and especially listening to the wrong people.
Yeah, way too many people saying different things that sound alike, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Thanks.
We're going to ask why ignorance is now viewed as a virtue. Remember when ignorant people at least had the decency to be ashamed of it? And now they wear it like a badge of honor. And I would say that is a societal sea change. This is a new thing.
Yes, and it's not just ignorant people, right? It's regular people with ignorant opinions, unresearched and undeveloped opinions, and taking pride in the fact that they are ignorant about that.
I think they really are. And I think a parallel aspect of this is look at what has happened to the concept of lying. Lying has been completely destigmatized. In the past, even liars would pay lip service to being anti-lying.
Right.
Now, once again, I'm lying. What you going to do about it? And the idea of telling the truth has now become quaint or passé to the point where you wonder, well, what's wrong with that guy? He's telling the truth. You no longer have to do that. You're no longer expected to tell the truth, and I find that frightening.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about what objective means and what it doesn't, what partisan means and what it doesn't. We're always soliciting your questions. Right now, the best way to get to us is at Paul Alexander at radicallyrational.com. But we're always hoping to hear from you, want lots of feedback from you, just to have some fun. Every time we do one of these broadcasts, we're going to have a logical fallacy of the week. And we've got a really good one selected for you today. And keep in mind, logical fallacy means you can't do that. That's not arguing fairly. That doesn't make sense. But just know this, because we're very, very polite. Neither Lori nor Paul is going to chide you when you resort to a logical fallacy. We will leave that to a 9-year-old girl.
That made sense. I like to congratulate your parents.
See, she can be relentlessly positive as well. So, Lori, because I couldn't help it, I went back and listened to our first podcast, and here was my one takeaway. I was way too much of a gentleman, and that will never, ever happen again.
Just when I was bragging about how generous you are on the air. Yeah. I'm ready, though. I've got notes.
It just sounds like one of our phone conversations on a Sunday night, and that's the idea.
And we have to get used to those moments of silence when you're shocked by something I've said. Just
absolutely stunned by your brilliance.
Well, I don't know.
I tell you somebody who does stun me frequently with his brilliance. Of course, we're going to have guests on this show.
Yep.
And, you know, we've been talking about the profession of journalism being under attack. I'm here to tell you that there are people of impeccable integrity in that industry. Not everybody, unfortunately, but when we have a shining example, you better know we're going to welcome that person to Radically Rational. This is a man that I have known for a long time and admired since the first moment I met him. I'm talking about the outstanding and award-winning columnist for the San Antonio Express News and my DNA twin, Kerry Clack. Man, any day I get a chance to see you is a good one.
Same here, Paul, and great to be here with you and Laurie and to, I guess, officially be your first guest.
Well, we couldn't have done any better, and that's for sure.
Yeah, we're setting the bar really high.
So one of the things we're trying to establish here, Kerry, is when we have a guest on, we always want to soften them up with a really easy softball question just to make them feel comfortable and warm. So my first question to you is, as a society, how the hell did we get here? Take your time.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
I think like human beings, a society, once you're born, you start to die. So it's how well do you live in between before the decadence really sets in and death finally settles out things. I just pulled that out of my head right
Thank you so much for playing along there and for halfway taking me seriously.
Right?
Everybody is under no obligation to do that.
I would have, but there was this silence between y'all. They really expect me to answer this.
That was good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was most impressive. So, look, we're all human beings. When you hear people attacking your profession, how do you process it? How do you react?
It's like someone attacking your family or you personally. It's something that it's not just a job. It's what you believe in, and one of the reasons, most of the reasons that most people are journalists is because we want to do good. We want to report facts and maybe have some positive impact on our society, and we want to inform people. And it's such a cliche thing to do. It's always been a cliche thing to attack journalists, politicians, lawyers, and car salesmen.
And starting quarterbacks. No better job than the backup quarterback, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I know it comes with the territory and people. Well, journalism and journalists are attacked when journalism and journalists don't confirm someone's bias or the way they think the world is or the way a particular issue is. That's what it comes down. Now, if we say something or write something that they agree with, that affirms something that they've been saying, then they'll quote us. But for the most part, it's the people who bring you information that may not always be uplifting and may not always make you feel good are going to always be the ones who are going to always be attacked for doing that. The whole messenger thing.
I was just thinking, when did it go from just simply shooting the messenger to now, where we have reporters and people in the media who are truly reporting things that aren't factual or researched?
Actually, I thought and that's true. And I was thinking when you said when it went from shooting the messenger to actually shooting the messenger, I was thinking what happened.
Oh gosh, that's true too. That's scary. Obviously social media and being able to go online, that spreads information, but it also spreads disinformation and misinformation. Right. I remember back in the day when I was at the paper the first time around 8 years ago, before I left 8 years ago.
We all have a first time around in this profession.
I've noticed that.
That is a common trait.
I used to say that one of the great things about these new things, blogs, was that everybody has them. But then the bad thing about blogs is that everybody has them, because you can just put stuff out there and then people will quote it. Doesn't matter if you did any kind of research or if it's factually based. You're going to be quoted by someone.
Yeah, I would say this. Now that everybody is their own gatekeeper, it is at once really self-empowering. And you think about this, and it's very democratic, it's very egalitarian. Yeah, now I have more power over my own life and my own communication. very self-empowering, but it can be very self-destructive. And a person has to, first of all, be a person of goodwill and exhibit amazing discipline to really carry that off properly. And by the way, that's true regardless of what you do for a living, whether you're a professional journalist or whatever you do. A lot of this is just a matter of personal integrity.
Right.
And you would think also that the people who follow those, if they see that someone doesn't have integrity and isn't doing the research, isn't being fair, not necessarily objective, but being fair, that would be a sign for them that this is someone who they cannot read, they cannot trust, so you would stop reading them, much less quoting them.
May I shake your hand?
This is a little bit inside baseball, but I want to get both of your impressions here. You know, you hear people attacking the media. And by the way, just so you'll know, we're not going to in any way blanketly defend the media. There have been egregious errors here, and when we see that, we're going to absolutely slam them. But again, you have people saying, well, you're biased. Well, in many cases, biased has come to mean they disagree with you or they're presenting information that you don't want to hear. So I think to some degree, the definition of that has changed. But in wanting to compare notes, Carrie and Lori, we've all been doing this a long time. In the decades that I've been involved in this, I don't think I've seen maybe more than 2 episodes of somebody really going after somebody unfairly with a quote-unquote agenda. Now, this is what I do see, though. If there is a bias, it is reflected simply in what gets covered and what doesn't get covered in the first place. In other words, the piece that's done is typically not slanted, and you want to make sure that it's balanced, that you've got multiple sources, et cetera. But where I sometimes do see some institutional bias, again, is this whole issue of what we cover and what we throw in the trash can.
Are you talking about the same story? Differing sides? Or?
Well, and really what I'm talking about is the subject matter, whether or not a story gets selected and done in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember this going back years ago. I won't name the brand and I won't name the station, but a news story came across that effectively reported some misconduct of I'm trying to be really careful, misconduct of the company and of its head, presidents, and et cetera. Bad things were going down at this company. They were also a major advertiser on the radio station. This story was national. And as soon as the story came across the news feed, we got a hotline call to kill the story. And we were not allowed to read the story about this company because they were a huge advertiser for not just our radio station, but everybody in the conglomerate. So that's a problem. And that's years ago. Well, I mean, I'm not telling you, 15 years ago.
Carrie, it's a problem because there is this unholy alliance, and there should be a tension between news editorial and sales. And sometimes that gets worked out in some very, very problematic, even questionable ways.
Yeah, I know that in the same way, trying to be careful how I phrase this, there was, years ago, we had, I'm not going to even go there.
Oh.
But it has to do with advertising, and it doesn't matter how great a particular company is, and it can be the greatest company in the city. Sometimes there were decisions made by folks in news management not to do particular stories because of advertising.
There are untouchables. Now, I have seen examples of that.
What do you mean?
Subjects you just don't dare touch, or people you just don't dare question, or stories that maybe you don't pursue because there is some kind of advertising or sponsorship connection.
This is good inside baseball.
Yeah.
Because people, it's like the record industry. Don't make me tell you my Grammy story.
Well, you see what it's done to me. It's made me tear my hair out. No more of that.
I want to hear the Grammy story.
It's dirty. It's like that. It bursts your bubble. Again, we talked about the Cronkite years, which the people who remember the Cronkite years is now dwindling. But it's a similar thing where it kind of takes the magic out of it. And TV. And you said earlier about, I wrote notes down, the association, about shooting the messenger, the association with, our news resources, TV, radio, and now online. I don't think we're far enough away from that being our go-to mothership of news. So when people start reading blogs or opinion panels or even comments on Facebook, I gesture towards Paul. I don't think.
But why would you do that?
I don't know. It's weird. Culturally, I don't think we're at the spot where we have the skill or the automatic skill to differentiate between opinion and fact. And now, because it's all out in the open, and, we have the ability. Right. But I think we see something on TV and we go, oh, okay, that's true. Because that's how we were all raised, and that's how who was coming up was raised, and their parents were. It's just kind of it gives credibility to the information because it's coming out of a device, But now we're getting to the point now where nobody likes that because, hey, that's not right, and hey, that's just your opinion. So we're finally starting to get to a place where we can differentiate between opinion. You have a face like you can't wait.
No, I'm listening to this and I'm with you because these things, Carrie and Lori, really do make my head hurt. Because they do because you want to do the right thing, and sometimes doing the right thing and determining the right thing and pursuing the right course of action isn't as simple as maybe you think.
Makes no sense whatsoever.
All right, so we thought every show has to have a gimmick, and we're not above that. Oh, heck no, Lori, we're not. Heck no, we're not above that.
All we need now is merch.
Yeah, absolutely. So, whether it's a lightning round kind of thing or just a gimmick like the logical fallacy of the week, we're going to do this. The old Greeks and the Romans, etc., they were pretty good about this. And they came up with this actual list of logical fallacies, meaning you can't do that because the argument doesn't work because it's just not logical. So for the foreseeable future, and keep in mind, you thought we wouldn't be here for the second show. All right? So don't bet against us on the third show. But the logical fallacy of the week is what is called tu quoque, which essentially means, you're not going to come at me with that lame stuff, are you? Actually, tu quoque means the logical fallacy of whataboutism.
But what about...
Yeah, okay. Is it just me? And it's always okay to say, yeah, Paul, you're just weird. It's all right. But are you just hearing that more and more? And of all the logical fallacies, that one is the one that strikes me as maybe the most juvenile. The whataboutism, that because I can deflect this conversation and I can find an example of a skunk on the other side, that means my skunk on my side doesn't stink. You gotta be kidding me. Yeah. Are we hearing that more and more? Or just my imagination running away with me?
No, it's playground stuff. Oh, yeah.
It's about the intellectual
rubber,
equivalent.
You're glue.
Exactly. I was just thinking of that.
I'm rubber, you're glue. And the other, oh, yeah, I know what you are, but what am I? It's very juvenile. You're right. But we see it all the time. And the one that I see the most is I know I'm guilty of that. They are still using Hillary and Obama. Well, what about? Well, you, but yeah. Or should be the, and it's like, can you just let that go?
Every now and then when I'm feeling particularly snarky and I just want to stop that.
How can you tell?
What about the Hindenburg? You never talk about the Hindenburg.
That is so funny. I watched a video the other day of the Hindenburg actually coming down, not to put a downer.
That's amazing.
If you haven't watched that, you need to. It's like 3-minute long video, and the guy's talking about the humanity. That guy. That's where that came from.
And the guy that's filming all this, even the guy who's filming in the foreground. I used to look at the Waltons. I love the Waltons. And there's an episode in the Waltons where John Boy wins a contest where he's gonna go cover that. The Hindenburg, and so they actually use that footage in that particular episode. But it's amazing the way it. And you see people jump. It's amazing footage. Yeah,
your mouth is a jar with that.
But see, there's a life lesson in even this.
Yes.
Even with the Waltons, with John Boy, it was his lifetime ambition to be a journalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look what happened there, right? You just need to find a cleaner profession, right? Like that old line about being the piano player in the brothel or something like that.
Nice.
Why is,
Yeah.
guys, I don't think this is my imagination. Why have we normalized lying, and why has the stigma been removed from lying? Being called a liar used to have some real consequences, and you wanted to avoid that. Now, you're not only excused if you lie, you are expected to lie.
How do you mean?
That ain't right. I see less outrage in the
Okay.
face of obvious, discernible lies.
Do you think that certain situations and stories and people have given others permission to lie, and now it's a plague?
Well, I think that's part of it. And Carrie, the other thing I think is simply if I identify with this person, and rightly or wrongly, I perceive they're on my team, they wear my jersey, they're on my side, then anything that person says, however outrageous, however completely untrue, is fine with me. And I'm not just going to overlook it, I'm going to defend it.
I think that's actually it ties into, but maybe a greater problem than the line. Something about the line, and I'm just thinking, politics and sports are the two professions, two activities that just envelop us every day. And so, and they're also the two professions where it's just more acceptable. We're used to hearing somebody lie, whether it's a coach saying, I have no interest in taking that job. And then
Not until tomorrow.
then tomorrow, yeah. Or any politician, and you can also make the case that for politicians, there's sometimes, and maybe there's a way they can do it without actually lying, but there's sometimes when it's involving an issue or something that they can't reveal yet, where they can skirt around it. But even beyond that, there's just outright lying. I think that between those two professions, we've gotten kind of used to it, and I'm trying to avoid the elephant in the room. But over the past 3 years, the line is truly just a daily, hourly part of our existence because it's coming from the highest office in the land. And again, this is not because Donald Trump is a Republican or because Donald Trump is a conservative, and that's debatable. It's because Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and he's different unlike any human being who's walked this earth. And I think lying has been something that we've gradually accepted, as you said, over the years. But over the past 3 years, we've just really gotten immune to it. I mean, he can be at somewhere where he's fond at by everybody, and he says something that's a lie. They know it's a lie, but it's okay.
I think you make a really good point. You make a lot of really good points. We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
We were talking earlier about media having credibility just because it was the media, and I think we're talking about politics and sports, and to a degree, a lot of that is showbiz, right?
Showbiz.
Like that's that saying. It's not a nice saying, but it's a saying. Politics is showbiz for ugly people, and there's just a lot of. There are a lot of adjustments made around that, tiptoeing and white lies. And we have gone from, like you're talking about the coaches saying, denying and all this, trades. And I think we have gone from little white forgivable lies to
Excellent, yeah.
big, giant. And it's been this long, slow process of abusing the American public and expecting us to just accept and forgive those little lies. And now if they say they accepted the little lies, they'll accept the big lie. If you accept that I'll intentionally, slap you on the arm a little too hard, then maybe you'll also accept that I kick you in the pants so really hard. It's just kind of go ahead.
No. As always, I'm listening to you, and I'm going, yeah, this is really thought provoking.
Yeah.
At some point, though, not only have we removed the stigma from the liar, but we have made defending and advancing lies not only okay, we've just kind of made it part of the way the game is played. And Lori and I had a conversation a couple of days ago, and it was really good because she did something that nobody can do. She rendered me absolutely speechless here. And I thought, no, I get where she's coming from. So along with this whole question of why has the the stigma been removed from lying, why is character now being completely dismissed? And I said this as a statement, and Lori said, "Oh, okay, tell me what you mean." And it was like, okay, I get it. I will tell you that in my own life, the very people who I respect, my elders, people who raised me, people who taught me, people who coached me, and the same people who have been telling me for decades that character is everything, are now telling me that character means absolutely nothing. And I will tell you, more than anything else, Lori, I'm just bewildered by that, because it takes your social mores and bearings and it just turns them right upside down.
And again, sorry about that, doing it in the name of social structure. You know, if you approach someone who's lying and who has no character, they would deny it, and so would the people who agree with them. And they would say that instead of lying, they're actually defending the right thing to do. They're actually their stance is the right stance. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
I do. And you went on, and it was like, I realized.
I wanted information.
Lori's right. Lori's right.
I wanted an example.
And my wife, Jo, who we'll hear from in a minute, she looks at me and goes, "Lori's right, dang it." Yes. Okay, and she was. So Lori challenged me to come up with some examples.
Yes.
And once again, when somebody doesn't tell the truth, there is a word for what we're going to call them. I'm not going to name names, but his initials are Franklin Graham. You are a puke. Am I wrong?
No.
Could there be a more egregious example than that? I mean, a guy that has spent his entire lifetime advancing this, admirably, I think, this agenda of...
Admirably.
No, I do. I mean, I really mean, I believe in all these things. I believe in truth. I believe in character. So, but when the same person who has made that the foundation of their persona now stares straight into a television camera and says, "It just doesn't matter," make you want to holler, throw up both your hands.
We got Marvin Gaye, Verdine Wright,
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix, who had The Temptation, Three Dog Nights.
Three Dog Nights making more money today than they have in the last 2 decades.
I think with character, I do think that it still matters. The problem is something you said earlier about somebody who's on our team, who has our jerseys, and we'll go through any lengths to defend them. And again, it's just unavoidable. When we're talking about a particular individual, the person who Franklin Graham is defending,
Franklin cannot run the dig route as well as Jimmy Graham can. I'm just going to say that right now.
It didn't have the speed.
Yeah.
There's two things I know that happen. One, either you dismiss the importance of character when it's somebody who you're so aligned with, as he is with the president, or you somehow ignore everything and talk about the great character of the president. In spite of everything we know, everything we see, we hear, and this part of the gaslighting. I mean, just read, people read his tweets, but sometimes, and don't do this too often because it's not healthy, but read some of the comments, to his tweets of his supporters, and just talk about what a incredible human being and great man he is. And someone of the same party, John McCain, was a great man, had great character, but
look at the way that character has been assassinated,
which
in some quarters. We do, obviously, care what you think and want to hear from you, and we've got a mechanism for doing that, right? And it'll get more sophisticated as this goes on, because we will be doing these episodes of Radically Rational till the end of time. Bank on it. But right now, the best way to do it is just to email us at Paul Alexander at radicallyrational.com. That's Paul Alexander at radicallyrational.com. Some of you have done that, so we turn to our producer, JoJo, with a question that one of our listeners has relayed to us.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here with you. Megan has written, how can the American public trust information on the right way to fight the spread of the coronavirus to our nation?
Boom. If I were to speculate that may become the key question of 2020 going forward, okay, this is something that goes beyond political jousting. This has life and death connotations here. And I'm going to say this. If you think you've seen an assault and a war on science so far, wait till you hear the misinformation and the disinformation regarding the coronavirus that actually has already started.
Yes, I heard a report this morning that the CDC is still not ready to call it a pandemic because, and I love how it all, like we have this big, huge health concern, and there are people way on both sides of the extreme.
Right.
I'm not worried about it. And then you have people hiding in their bunkers with their gas masks on, and I'm not exaggerating. So they don't want to start the widespread panic effect. But it's already happening. So I think we're desperate for real information about it. Just tell me, how easily can I catch it? You know, so far all I've heard, all I've concluded is that the flu is worse. It's more contagious. It's a more more people have died from it, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to freak out about something, freak out about the flu, which you and I both do every year in different ways.
Yeah, we do, in different ways.
I'm ready. Always ready for the flu fight.
Yeah. Oh, it's an annual event,
Flu
right?
fight
Yeah.
starts with Paul, and then I worry about
Yeah,
the
we usually get
infectious
to about, what do you
disease
say,
part.
October 15th, Halloween at the latest. We start arguing about the flu.
About the flu
Yeah.
vaccine. But anyway, I think that we're at a part. This is going to be a scary thing for most people because the longer it's around, which it's going to be around till it's spread, until it continues to mutate, the longer it's around, the more people are going to actually get concerned because they're going to know somebody who has it. And then you know, that whole my friend has it, my neighbor has it, i.e. that's too close. It's no longer just China. You know, it's a scary thing. It can be scary. So we need clear-cut information.
Yeah, and Lori references numbers. Well, Carrie, you kind of got to get inside the numbers. It is absolutely true that in absolute numbers, many more people have died this year of the flu than have died of coronavirus. But the preliminary figures would indicate that on a percentage basis of the people who have contracted one disease or the other, folks are dying at a much higher rate when it comes to the coronavirus.
I went to the press briefing yesterday at downtown on this. The mayor called and they had very impressive Rear Admiral from the CDC, who's director of like the global initiative, and folks from the Metro Health Department. And I actually left the briefing a bit more reassured. I mean, they were very honest. I mean, we don't know everything that's happening in China. I mean, beginning with that, because we can't. We can't.
We won't.
But with what's happening here, they were quite clear that we now have 6 confirmed cases, and they all came from the 144 people who were on that ship in Japan, and they're quarantined. And Dr. Knight says that if she's not within 6 feet of one of the positive patients, she doesn't even wear her protective gear. And someone asked, how can you reassure us that we won't get the coronavirus? And she said, unless you're within 6 feet of one of the evacuees in this quarantine zone, you're not going to get it. So because it's not necessarily airborne, it's more of a respiratory illness. But at the same time, they're very clear, saying that there are different kinds of coronaviruses. This is a new one,
right.
So they can only since January, so they can only base what they know on something like SARS or MERS. That's how they make the comparison to coronavirus now. But,
And they may not be comps.
Yeah, and they're very clear that this could be something else. But they're saying that right now, we do need to be careful about panic and about hysteria.
This is right up your alley, because you would point this out, that we only know what we know at a given point in time. And it's not necessarily that anybody's lying or anybody's dissembling or anybody's trying to mislead, but particularly with something like this, like a new virus, we're going to learn more going forward, and that doesn't mean that our assumptions right now are necessarily valid.
No, right. And then the virus is going to continue to mutate as it spreads.
Yeah.
And it's just, there are a lot of factors.
Yeah.
And of course, now, like we're talking about the CDC not ready to call it a pandemic yet. And the main concern is because of the economic, factor that's involved. You start doing that, and numbers are already tanking because of the fears about it, and it's scary to watch because and they were talking about why don't you stop all the flights from here to there, and because we need to get supplies to and fro. There's a lot of medical personnel and supplies that need to go back and forth, and you can't put the globe on a lockdown because that's not going to keep it from spreading either, because that little virus doesn't care. It'll just hop right over.
There was also some
or sneeze right over.
A lot of concern about the first group of 90 people that came in, then the 144. The 90 that were in Wuhan, and then the 144 who came in from the ship. And why were we bringing them into the United States? Well, they were all Americans. They were all American citizens, and to begin with. And secondly, we have the resources to be able to care for them. And like the 6 who are positive right now, they're at the TDI, the Texas infectious disease. I always get the acronyms mixed up. So they're all isolated in one place. There was this fear that they were spread out in different hospitals, and they were keeping the hospitals secret, but they're in one place and they're quarantined. But again, this is just what we know right now. I mean, what we know 3 months from now may be a pandemic, and we're all in November. The election is a moot point.
Every one of these informational and journalistic questions that we've been discussing here, this is going to be brought to bear in this story. I hesitate to use the word crisis, although it may come to that. But all of those things are going to be brought to bear in the way the coronavirus epidemic is covered.
Right.
We got time to take another question. JoJo, what you got?
Okay, I've got a good one here. Can the government regulate social media outlets like they do with the FCC?
Oh, baby. Now, see, again, I love questions that make my head hurt. This is just my reflex reaction, guys, and I want to know what you think. No, certainly not to any greater extent than you can put any kind of constraints on the First Amendment in the first place. The old fire in a crowded theater, et cetera, obvious libel, obvious slander. But in terms of regulating that, see, what makes the FCC different is the public airwaves, et cetera. I think my position constitutionally is no, I don't think so. How about you guys?
Morally, I agree with you.
Same,
but
yeah.
But the FCC was developed and came about and set their standards and parameters around a time when all we had was TV and radio. And now we've got people podcasting on Facebook. So why shouldn't they be under the same? It's like Radio Free Europe over there now. We can say and do whatever we want on Facebook Live or on any kind of other podcast or YouTube, or I guess there are stricter parameters on YouTube, but it's kind of there's a Wild West thing.
That's a good analogy. The YouTube.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I heard a father on NPR this Sunday. I didn't hear all the story, but his daughter had been murdered. And
that horrible story of the journalist that was murdered on live television.
Yeah,
so as a human being, as a parent, I mean, you just want to throw up.
And so you have to. And he was talking about just what he had to try to go through to YouTube to get it taken off the air, and like he has to document, every particular video that's on. But I agree morally and constitutionally, but it's complicated.
Both of you at different times and sometimes simultaneously have accused me of pulling analogies out of one bodily cavity or another, and I'm not above that. So, look, to a certain extent, I'm a sports guy, okay? So I'm going to ask this question. all of these moral and ethical issues and all of these things about people dividing into two camps and to dismissing character and to removing the stigma from lying, and you either have to feel this way or the other about a certain issue, is that not all reflected in what's going on with the Houston Astros?
I knew you were going to go there. You've been dying to talk about
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So where do we start?
Well, I hear this. I hear people going, "Oh, it just doesn't matter. Everybody cheats." Well, that's a half-truth
Every
at
time
best.
somebody
because-
cheats in sports, they say everybody
yeah.
cheats, which brings us back to sports and politics.
and what about? And to
Well,
quote
yeah.
way. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I merely pointed out because, look, true confession time. I got an emotional attachment to the Astros.
Same here.
I've been an Astros and Colt 45 fan since I was a little boy, and I've always had this, maybe I created this, but in my mind, the Astros have always been the good guys. And I actually have some concrete examples of that over the years that I think would bear that out. And you look at this objectively, and you cannot defend it. And you look at the process and the dynamic of what happened here and who didn't stop it, etc. I merely posted on Facebook the other day that I'm just really sad as an Astros fan because everybody's directing hatred at this team that I loved, and I really can't defend the team, and I can't tell people they're. And I have a friend who works in journalism who just vaporized me, just completely detonated
What'd they
me.
say?
You hate the Astros. Oh, no, I think I started this statement with saying that I love the Astros, and that is the source of my dissonance right now. Yeah. You know?
Yes.
See, I was able to give you a concrete example this time. So.
Just trying to keep you honest.
No, somebody needs to. That's for sure. As the episodes go on, we're going to go into a lot of different areas. And let me just kind of pose this as food for thought right now as we wrap this one up and do something that nobody ever thought we would do, and that is get through 2 full episodes of Radically Rational. But is there a chance that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders actually have more in common than we might think? I always know it's good when I can hear crickets in here, right?
What kind of answer does he want? Was what I was
The question is never what kind of answer do I want. It's what is your answer?
They're more alike than they are dissimilar.
I think I'm kind of leaning that way, Carrie. What do you think?
Alike in which ways?
Right.
Well, let me start with this. Obviously, Donald Trump, unless for whatever reason he decides he doesn't want to play, which isn't going to happen, he's going to be the nominee as he seeks a second term. And right now, as we record episode number 2, and these things are very volatile, very fluid, it looks like Bernie Sanders is taking a commanding lead, and we're still about a week away from Super Tuesday as we do this. The first thing that strikes me is that if you're going to consider Sanders the leader of the Democrat Party and you're going to consider Trump, who clearly is the leader of the Republican Party, they're both presiding over parties that bear no resemblance to their traditional character either direction. None.
That's actually, that's a good point. On one hand, I think that the base of Sanders' support is pretty much the base of the Democratic Party. But there's also a reason why there's this concern that if Sanders is the nominee, that he'll lose. And this is, as I'm thinking about this now, there's a similarity, but one difference between the two of them, I think, with Sanders, his supporters, he built. It's a natural for him, for who he is, and he's taken this movement. I think it's a good name for. He's taking this movement through the primaries and possibly to November. Whereas with Trump, this base was almost like had to come together piece by piece by piece, and it just kind of grew bit by bit by bit because November 2016. No one thought he was going to really win. I mean, he didn't have acceptance speech prepared.
Right.
And since this election, we've seen it's whatever it's 30-40%, it's solid. And again, I'm just thinking as I'm speaking, so it may not be making sense, but it seems like with Bernie, there's something that's organic there, where Trump has pieced it together from people who, at this point, I know what I'm saying.
Well, there are people, Lori, who would say that, look, take your political feelings out of this and just analyze the horse race, okay? Just look at this mathematically.
Yeah.
And they would say, look, the very same fears that got the Dems beat in 2016, they are creating an absolute instant replay of that. This is going to trip all of the triggers of people who are motivated by fear, and the same fears that were directed at Hillary Clinton in 2016 are going to be directed in spades at Bernie Sanders for sure. So you can kind of question the strategic intelligence of doing that. See, and then, Laura, you throw in the actual math of the Electoral College, and you question it even more, right?
Right, and I think it's the modus operandi of both political parties just historically seems to be just an appeal to emotion, right? When it gets down to the down and dirty, it's there's always the if you vote for him, it's because you want Medicare for all. And do you realize what will happen to this country if you get what you want? And you're all of a sudden questioning. It's the gaslighting.
And by the way, that is kind of a viable question.
Oh, yeah. And the inverse is true. Well, I can't afford health care. I can't afford health insurance. What am I supposed to do?
Actually, you had some Sanders supporters who either didn't vote or voted for Trump in 2016. I think the great dissimilarity and I know y'all agree with this, that we have to make, and this is with Trump as opposed to any of the Democrats who are running against him, any of the Republicans who ran against him in 2016.
Well, literally unprecedented.
Yeah, this is an authoritarian mindset. This is someone who has no respect for the court system, for the laws, who truly thinks he is above it all. And this is not, again, it's not because I have too much respect for Republicans and conservatives to pretend that Trump is an authentic Republican and conservative. He is the most fascinating, frightening outlier we have ever had in American politics. And so that's why I want to make clear that that my criticism of him isn't because he's his party. It's because of the man and what we have seen since he's been in power. I mean, the man was impeached and has no respect for other human beings, has no respect for the laws, for the Constitution. And that's the greatest difference between him and anybody else who would run against him. It'll be hard for me. There's no way I could ever vote for Trump. And you could take the worst human being in the world who's not a mass murderer, and if you put him up against Trump, I'll vote for this guy.
Whoa.
Well,
You're informed.
and with a lot of the electorate on both sides, that's kind of where we are right now. So let me just kind of leave you with this. What you just described, by any definition, Trump is not what has ever been considered a conservative. All right, so these definitions of conservative and liberal have been turned on their heads so many times right now that they're really worthless. No two people can agree on what they mean, and yet it continues to dominate our discourse. Carrie Clack.
Sometimes.
No, Gloria, please.
Oh, no, sometimes those are the only arguing points we have left anymore.
Yeah.
We can't even get to the real.
Can't get to the issue.
Sorry.
And as time goes on, as this election season goes, hey, Goldie has made an appearance here on Radically Rational. And Goldie is always well. And as you can see, Goldie herself is radically rational. Have you ever seen a more rational puppy dog than that? As time goes on, we're going to talk about the fact that the media typically covers the horse race of politics rather than issues. And I think that is a legitimate charge that is leveled against the media here. We're going to do that. Legitimate. And I'm just going to give you something to think about because, Carrie, any day I see you is a great day. Lori, we'll get back to arguing in no time at all. But most people concede that Trump could be a gaffe machine on the campaign trail. So could Bernie. Remember, we're radically rational. We are bringing facts back into
Thanks to
fashion.
both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
want to come back.
We're not crazy.
You are.
Next time.